I'm recording.
Right, welcome to the Tash and Bex Flex. We got cut off as usual by our censorship issues, but we now have Jerry back for part 2. Hello, Jerry. Thank you for coming back. Putting up with our shenanigans.
And I'm just going to say I am recording this through another phone because it's the only way we can do it. So apologies for any sort of shoddy movement.
The censors have removed our sound today, so that's where we're at. Anyway, Jerry, you were telling us, you were talking about the schizophrenics. Where were we? We were at the point of... Can you remember?
It was about the hallucinations, wasn't it? And I think we could...
yeah. It was when, when I got to the state psychiatric hospital, everybody there
that was it.
Believed that the voices were hallucinations.
Yeah.
And they also believed it was caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Even though there's no actual material evidence or tests that can prove that.
No. Yeah, that was completely made up. I believe it was by Eli Lilly in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was embarrassing for them to not know what caused schizophrenia or why their medications worked. So the phenothiazines, the tranquilizer that they used, the basic tranquilizer they used to treat schizophrenia, was discovered in French dye labs back in the early 1900s. So the workers in those dye labs and the chemical labs where they made the dyes would get all whizzed out, blah, blah, blah. So, one of the drug companies came and they extracted whatever that was that caused that. They wouldn't let them use that drug in France because the psychoanalyst guys were running the show back then. So they took it and brought it to the United States, and they found that they could tranquilize entire psychiatric populations with that stuff. They could reduce their staff. It was less trouble. They didn't have to fight with these guys and throw them into straitjackets because there were horrible fights before they had these drugs.
It must have been awful.
Oh, it was. The staff would get hurt. Patients would get hurt. Broken arms, broken fingers and legs, and they had to stuff them into these straitjackets. That's the only way they could control them, and they had to fight them to do that. So once they found these drugs, it was like a miracle.
Yeah, they must have thought, this is great. This fixes the problem.
Oh yeah, this is wonderful. We can control entire populations with this stuff, and so they caught on real quick over here, but it didn't cure anything.
No.
So it went big time, and big pharma got into this. I mean, the medical system had already been taken over by the Rothschilds and the big bankers. Here in the United States, they made it a law that if medical schools didn't teach pharmacology-based medicine, that they weren't allowed to graduate medical students.
And they wouldn't get the funding and all that sort of stuff.
They wouldn't get the funding. Mm-hmm. They would not be able to license them. So they took control of the medical establishment over here.
Of the narrative, yeah.
Very early. They paid off Congress to pass laws that benefited Big Pharma, and they've grown into an out-of-control monster since then.
Absolutely.
You saw what just happened. So
what do you think, Jerry, with the people that are suffering? Why do you think some people hear the voices so loudly and other people just never are affected? Because I know I come from a place of woo and sort of spiritual work, but what I see is people who are clairaudient. And just like some people are clairvoyant and see things when they close their eyes or whatever, are these people just able to hear what I see when I'm working in the fourth dimensional realms of energetic, entities, beings, our energy body, our energy fields? Because that's what I'm doing. Are they just able to hear what I can see and other people just can't?
Well, I can't see them. Like I said, I could feel them when I was working in the emergency room. Last 10 years of my that I was working for
in the hospital,
the system was in big hospital emergency rooms where I was doing psych crisis. Yeah. And the police would drag these guys in off the street and they would be raw. They would be full of drugs. They'd be
very dangerous.
Fluently psychotic. I mean, they were just out of control. I could feel those things at that time, and it felt like it was like a icky electrical feeling.
Okay.
I mean, it is horrible. They are horrible. It is a horrible thing.
There was no other feeling like it that I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
And when I started, what they hated is for me to, in the emergency room, they didn't want you working with anybody. They just wanted you to diagnose them and get them out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Get them, because the doctors didn't know what to do with them. They just wanted them out of their faces.
Diagnosed and out.
And drugged. Diagnosed and drugged.
And then either off to the next department who can do the care.
Yeah.
Take responsibility for them.
Right. Kick them out, send them to the mental health center, hospitalize them, do something. But they didn't want you working with them there. So with what I knew, I wanted to tell the patients who could handle it. And it was like walking on a tightrope, because if I told some of these patients the truth about what was happening to them and they went and told that to psychiatry, I'd be in big trouble. I got in trouble at the state hospital twice for asking these patients what they were hearing. I got called up in the psychiatrist's office and they said, "You will not do that. These things are hallucinations. And what you're doing by asking the patients questions about them, you're just making these patients worse." So they want no part of investigating what the voices are.
No, so they're not really, like you say, looking for answers. They're suppressing the problem to make their lives easier. But nobody wants to get to the nitty gritty of what is actually going on with these patients today.
Well, it's a spiritual battle, and these people are not spiritual. There's no spiritual component to psychiatry or psychology or social work.
So when you do your training, there is nothing in there that looks at the spiritual part of the brain or the body?
It's bone dry.
Is
and
it
we're
really?
Spiritual beings. Oh, yeah. We're spiritual beings. So if they don't take the spiritual component into account
at all,
they're missing the boat.
Wow.
So, I ran into the spiritual component, other than giving them the traditional spiritual stuff, with the MACE energy method. About maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, I kind of stumbled on a system that came out of Australia that took the spiritual component into account. So there's a one-to-one correspondence between schizophrenia and trauma. Mm-hmm. So getting that trauma out has been a problem. How do you get that trauma, that programmed trauma out? This system, it's called the MACE energy method, can go in there. It can find these traumas using a spiritual component of the person himself and go in there and discharge it. So that has to be done also.
So they're doing this energetically. Is that what you're saying?
It's energetic therapy.
Wow.
Because thoughts are energetic.
Oh, yeah, because we've done a lot of research on the electromagnetism and the electromagnetic field and us as electromagnetic beings and how much of our illness and sickness is interruption into our electromagnetic field, haven't we, Tash?
Mm.
Right. So you talk about energy. So a magnetic field is invisible.
Mm-hmm.
You can't feel it. You can't touch it. You can't smell it. You can't taste it. It's invisible. It's pure energy.
Mm-hmm.
There is no impure energy. So the spirit, the human spirit, is pure energy also. Gravity is, you can't see it. You can't detect it with your normal senses. Okay. Thought is the same way. It's energy.
Mm-hmm.
So what these entities are they are also energy.
Yeah.
Okay. They're a form of energy. They're a low vibrational energy. So to look at a magnetic field, you can't see it with your senses. So,
no, but you can sense it, sort of. Some people can sense it. Yeah, but you can't. No, again, it's not a tangible thing, is it?
Well, most people can't sense a magnetic field. But if you get some iron filings,
mm-hmm.
And you put them in a jar and you put a magnet there, now you can see.
Yes.
The outline of the magnetic field. It's not the magnetic field itself, but it's magnetic field effect on physical reality.
Yeah, and it's a prompt for
Okay.
you to then understand it and recognize it, isn't it, when you do that?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you can't see that energy itself. Same way with gravity. You can't see it. You can't taste
You feel the effects of
taste
it.
or anything, but you see the effects of it. It's the same thing with these things. With these voices, they are energetic, and they run patterns. Okay, so over the 50 some years I spent working with schizophrenics and mentally ill, I started seeing some of these patterns. Okay, so it's the same thing as looking at a jar with a magnet under there with iron filings. You can see the effect that energy has on physical reality. Well, the same thing happens with these voices. They have an effect on physical reality, and that effect runs patterns.
Yeah.
So if they run patterns, they can't be hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia and
they
big
just can't.
pharma are trying to brainwash us into believing. Okay, now what they did was very clever. Not only did they seal out researchers from frontline mental hospitals and frontline institutions, when they came up with the reasons of what schizophrenia was, they started making stuff up. So first they blamed their own mothers. Oh, the mothers did something wrong. That's the way you treated the child when they were young. It's your fault. But the mothers, no, I didn't treat my child bad. I mean, what are you talking about? This bunch of crap. So they upped the ante, and they moved the reason into a section where the normal people, normal psychiatrists and doctors and therapists and psychologists and social workers, they couldn't get there. So they say, oh, it's a genetic thing. There's a genetic predisposition. There's a schizophrenia gene. Who's going to debunk that? I mean, 98% of the population doesn't have any way to debunk that. And here you are with the psychiatric mafia and big pharma putting out millions of dollars worth of propaganda, pushing this for their own benefit, for their own profit, for their own control, not for the patient.
No, not for the patients at all.
So they didn't control all genetic researchers. Thank God there were some that they didn't have under their control. Now they block access to journals. They block access to printing the articles. They control the journalism part of it. So these people couldn't get their message out. Thank heaven some honest geneticist somewhere got that out and said, no, there is no genetic component. We can't find a schizophrenia gene. One does not exist. So they blew that out of the water. So here's the big pharma and the psychiatric mafia going, what are we going to say? We can't tell them we don't know what causes it. We can't tell them we don't have a cure. It makes us look like a bunch of idiots. So what are we going to say? So they made it Eli Lilly, I believe it was,
brain
made
chemistry.
up this. Yeah. Oh, it's a chemical imbalance of the brain. And it must be because we give them these phenothiazines and they calm down. So it must be something wrong with their brain, and our drugs kind of balance it out,
Yeah.
So when I got to this big hospital, I was watching what they did. They would bring these people in, and I've been working shoulder to shoulder with psychiatrists for 50 years. I mean, I see what they do. I see what they say. I mean, so here they're telling these people, oh, well, you can't have a chemical imbalance in your brain. Okay, fine. That's what virtually all the staff at the state hospital believed. But what I didn't see was them giving any kind of test to determine what chemicals were out of balance or by how much.
Exactly.
So there's 23 or so different neurotransmitters in the brain, something like that.
But you'd think that they'd further that research and find out, well, what is the chemical and how high does it have to be or low does it have to be?
What are the perimeters?
Before?
Yeah.
Exactly, like they would with any other.
Yeah,
test.
what's out of balance and by how much?
Yeah.
What's no, nothing. They would just went to a dartboard and they go, well, let's start out with this med and see what it does.
Yeah.
So at one time I was going, well, what's with this chemical imbalance? I mean, if they don't even know what it is, how are they possibly treating it?
Yeah.
So I asked one, said, well, it's a chemical imbalance. What's out of balance and by how much? And they go, oh, don't worry about that. The drug companies have figured that out.
But I bet they have.
What are you talking about? It's like, we let the fox in the hen house, and there's more hens. We just keep replacing them. I mean, it's like, what is he talking about? I'm like, what? So there was no evidence that there was a chemical imbalance that I could see. They weren't testing for it. They didn't even know what chemicals were out of balance. They didn't even know what the balance of the chemicals in the brain should be.
Yeah,
exactly.
There's no measurement for it.
They were completely ignorant.
No test.
They were running on lies. They were lying to the population.
Yeah.
And they had plenty of money to brainwash the population into believing this bullcrap that they were putting out.
It doesn't take much, let's face it. We've learned that, haven't we? It doesn't take much to brainwash. So when you were doing this work, Jerry, what sort of tests, how would they diagnose people with schizophrenia then?
Well, what they do is they had that DSM, that dictionary of psychiatric illnesses, which is their Bible.
Yeah.
They're making thousands of dollars a year, many thousands of dollars a year selling that thing. It's not backed up by any formal research whatsoever. It's just, their opinions. They write it down. They describe these segments of human behavior. They pathologize them. They assign a number on them so they can charge the insurance companies. Right. And if you get a bunch of them together, you get a bunch of psychiatrists together, and you give them a kind of semi-unclear diagnosis, virtually all of them will come up with a different diagnosis. There is no hard set established pattern. No. There is no research behind this dictionary of titles. It's just to charge the insurance companies and to label these people.
A label, yes.
Label them.
Yeah.
And those labels they're detrimental.
And once you have a label, you can make your money.
And very hard to shake off a label.
You're schizophrenic.
Yeah.
Once you've got a label.
Difficult to get rid of it. So do they do any blood work or anything like that when they're diagnosing?
No.
Nothing? No head scans, nothing whatsoever?
They do it for bipolar. They do it with lithium because lithium has to have a certain blood level.
Yes, they have to monitor it.
Right. They have to monitor that. That's bipolar. So they have to. But with schizophrenics, no.
No.
There's no blood tests, no EKG, no EEG. There are no tests to back up anything what they're saying.
Yeah, they say it's a chemical imbalance. Like you say, that's just crazy, isn't it?
And is there any other area of medicine where a diagnosis could be given with so little material evidence of
not that I know of.
Causation,
not that I know. And they're
crazy.
trying to turn these things into a disease. They're trying to convince people that these mental illnesses are a disease. And the medical establishment says, wait a minute, now you're going too far. There is no physical symptoms for this stuff. There is no pill we can give them to make it go away. There is no infection. There is no, it's not a disease.
No, it's an energetic attachment, isn't it?
It's a parasite living off your energy.
Yeah, it's a parasite.
So it's energetic.
Yes.
So that's what we're talking about here is energy.
Yes.
So just like with magnetism, just like with gravity, there are physical manifestations of these energies. You can't see the energy itself. You can't see electricity. You can't see gravity. You can't see ultraviolet light. You can't. But they have an effect on physical reality that you can see. Okay? Now, these entities do also. Now, they move that, like we said, first they blame mothers, then they blame genetics, then they blame the chemical imbalance, which there is none. They can't find any evidence for it. So they'll have to drum something else, but they're still using the chemical imbalance until they make up some other lie. But the physical effects that you can see, the psychological effects that you can see on these voices, they run patterns. They run predictable, well-established patterns. And these patterns repeat over and over again. They're predictable. So anything that runs patterns is not a hallucination. Hallucinations are random.
Because it's controlled,
all over the place. They're positive, they're negative, they're neutral, they're all over the place. And I've worked in hospitals. These aren't hallucinations. Okay? So they run fixed patterns. The first one I saw, the most common one, is their negativity. They are consistently, irrevocably negative. It's a consistent trait. They're derogatory, they're insulting, they're abusive, they're destructive. You know, they may fake to be the person's helper or like some spiritual guide when they start. When they get them hooked and they believe
Then
and
they
the person
turn.
accepts them, then they turn on them. You know, and then they got them because the person let them in.
Already trusted them, kind of thing.
And like you say, they hear these voices as their voices, as a second person, or, you know, as their own thoughts. So it sounds like them.
Well, when they first it starts like that. You know, it sounds like them, and then they start giving them information that they shouldn't have or they shouldn't know.
Like secret information.
Well, it's like this guy over, you know, watch him. He's going to cross the street in a minute, or there's a car going to appear that's green right in front of you in about 30 seconds. It's stuff like bullcrap like that.
Okay.
So once they get the patient to believe that they're some kind of positive spiritual thing that can help them, and they let them in, then they got them. You know, they've got their hooks in them, and they continue with that for a while until they get them. But the thing is what holds them on such a negative pattern? You know, why doesn't that pattern diverge and some of them are positive, some of them are negative, some of them are neutral? No, it's consistently negative. It reminded me of that movie that, you know, I don't know, came out years ago, maybe in the 60s or something, The Enemy Below, where a destroyer was chasing a U-boat. And the U-boat kept slipping away, but it kept returning to this same course heading back to Germany. So when the captain of the destroyer lost the U-boat, he would just turn back to that course again, and he would find the U-boat somewhere on that course. You know, it's the same thing with these things. They are running the same course over and over and over again. They're not random. What holds them on that negative course? Why don't they diverge? Why don't they branch out? Some being negative, some being positive, some being neutral. No, they're consistently negative. What force holds them on that negative path? First question. They're anti-religious. I found that out. When I was
I found that fascinating.
Yep. They want nothing to do with religion. They don't want the person following any kind of a spiritual path. If the patient repeats the 23rd Psalm, I've had several patients tell me that they react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. They want nothing to do with the 23rd Psalm or the 91st Psalm. And I'm not a religious fanatic. You know, I believe in God. I believe in spirits. But, you know, they're telling me these things. All this information came from them, and it took years to pull it out of them. Yeah.
Well done for getting it out.
What is actually said in those palm things? What do you know them off by heart?
I don't know off by heart, but it's
the
23rd
Psalm.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He me. Their rod and their staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You can see why they don't like that. And I know I left out a line there somewhere for you religious.
Oh, you did really well. You did really well.
Wow. So when that is said to them,
I got 98% of it, but I know there's one line that I didn't memorize, and I'm like, okay, I got enough of it to know it. It works.
No, you did well.
The voices hate that. You know, they hate that. They don't want the person turning toward God or the Lord or Christ, or they want nothing to do with that. They react negatively to that. They foster and they create negative emotion. So they want to lower the frequency of their victim. They want them to feel anger, anxiety, paranoia, guilt, and shame. Then they can take and they can suck their energy out of them.
Absolutely.
And you talk to schizophrenics and they say, you know, after they're being attacked. Now, what I'm telling you here is this isn't a genetics lab. This isn't a chemistry lab. You can see this stuff for yourself. Those of you who are working with schizophrenics, those therapists who are working with schizophrenics, you look for these traits. You will see them. They're right in front of your eyes. You don't need a genetics lab. You know, you don't need a chemistry lab. I mean, they're right there in front of your eyes. Just look for them. When the voices attack, after they attack, the patient feels drained. I've had several of them tell me they feel as drained as if they're working out in the hot sun with a pickaxe all day. You know,
so they're
that drained, exhausted. Yet they didn't use that energy. No. They didn't expend that energy. they were just tossing and turning in bed all night.
It was
So,
being siphoned off
you know,
them by the entity.
So is it often
by the entities.
is
So
it often a
they're-
nighttime attack then? Do these schizophrenic
Yes.
attacks happen at night?
Yep, they get stronger as soon as the sun goes down, which is
Okay.
odd. And then they attack most vociferously between
3 and 4, you're going to say?
3 and 4 in the morning. That's when they attack, and they usually wake the person up, and then they start their bullcrap. You're no good. You're rotten. All that stuff again.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you feel
So-
then that these voices, they have consciousness?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're conscious.
Yeah.
They know when you're fighting against them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other thing they have is, since they're energetic and since thoughts are energetic and your mind is energetic, they can go into the patient's mind and they can pull up every rotten thing that they've ever done in their entire life.
Yeah.
And they can bring it up and throw it in their face.
Ooh.
Shame you. Shame.
Yep, shame,
Yeah.
guilt.
Yeah.
That kind of, now that sounds kind of crazy, but that's what happens.
Well, they're
these are
these are
truly energetic beings.
They're truly evil,
Yes.
and they know exactly how to destroy your sense of self and take your vibration
Yes.
really low. And the lower, and you know, that's their survival. Is if you pick your vibration up, they can't
They
stay
go
with
like
you.
that, they disappear, don't they? So
Right.
what do you think, Jerry, makes certain people susceptible to it and others not, like in your work?
Well,
so like with mental health in general.
I think the biggest one is trauma.
Yeah.
Okay. Mental, physical, and emotional trauma. So that's where the Mace energy system really shines. You know, and what's so interesting about it, this was come up, the fellow who came up with this was devoid of any psychiatric, social work, psychology training. all this garbage that they filled my head with for 8 years, I had to overcome that and get it out of my way before I could find the truth. So John Mace never had to overcome all that trash. You know, he just went at it. You know, he was very curious. He was an intellectual. He was a very curious, avid reader. He read, you know, philosophy, all kinds of stuff. So he was trying to put together a picture of how the mind actually worked. And this took him a lifetime also. You know? But he came up with a system where he found that the mind itself was not what we thought the mind normally is. The mind, he said, was a stimulus response mechanism, kind of like a computer and a keyboard. So
This is what Natasha says, don't you, Tash?
I do. I'm very like this.
She says the computer's been designed off our brain,
Or vice versa.
or vice versa.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
So you put the input into the keyboard, and the picture appears on the screen. So what John Mace says is that what your mind does is only take pictures of where you put your attention. Okay, that's all it does. It's a stimulus response mechanism. It doesn't reason. It doesn't.
No,
think.
it's just an information in our information.
Computer, yeah.
Right.
But then
It's
there's
a stimulus response thing.
so then there's something else, isn't there? The consciousness,
Oh yeah.
which is
so all the stuff that we attribute to the mind belongs to the spirit.
yeah.
Okay, the reasoning, the thinking, the analyzing, the talking, all that stuff belongs to the spirit. You know, it's got nothing to do with the mind. And what he found is that the mind can transfer emotion into images, and then you can get rid of those images, and that will take care of the trauma.
Yeah.
It will drain the trauma. And I've never seen anything work like it. And I've had tons of in-service training, all this garbage for the licensure they made us keep up to license for years. Oh, you got to be licensed to know what you're talking about. Those guys are fools. They're total fools. You know, and this licensure is a bunch of crap. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you got to eat more of this garbage that doesn't work before we will license you. You know, and then they take money for the licensure, and it's all a big scam. You know.
Oh, Jerry, we've got 10 minutes because we're going to get cut off again. It's just told us we've got 10 minutes.
Very nice it told us this time.
Yeah, it did tell us this time. Didn't tell us last time. So what are the solutions? Obviously, you're working hard in a very different way to
Your colleagues.
your colleagues,
Your previous
Oh,
colleagues.
I'm doing what I can do, my end, from the spiritual side of it. I'm desperately trying to get out the message that these entities are real but not to be feared and very easily dealt with if you know what you're doing. Don't you think we need to educate people about energy and the body and the mind and the spirit?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure, because they've been completely deluded by Big Pharma and the psychiatric mafia and psychology. I mean, it's all, it's like, oh, you sit there and talk to the guy. So you bring up this same trauma over and over and over again, and it doesn't go away. It just, what it does is it widens. So I think there's a combination of things. Is one, they have to understand that the voices are not, they're not hallucinations. They're not garbage. These are negative entities feeding off these people. Number two is what they can do about it themselves. Number three is removing the trauma. And then number four, if that stuff doesn't work, is to go to somebody like you, Rebecca, and pull these things out. But then, they have to be sealed up and they have to get on a positive spiritual path, because if they don't increase their vibration, these things are going to come back. And when they come back, they come back with gangbusters. They come back with more.
Yeah, they could get attacked harder. But my problem is I can't give the aftercare because I'm working with people all over the place. I work remotely.
Well, see, that's where the stuff that I do comes in, because I can teach them what to do to care for themselves, to fight back. So they always have that. So if the voices come, that they can fight back at it, but they still have to move along a positive spiritual path.
Absolutely.
Because if they can't, it's not like medicine where you give somebody an antibiotic and their infection goes away. It doesn't work like that. If you remove those voices and they don't increase their, if they don't deal with the trauma, okay, so here's the trauma in there that creates that negative emotional energy that keeps triggering over and over and over again. That's going to keep triggering, and that trauma is going to build, and that negativity is going to keep building until they're attracted back again, even though you removed them. So you have to clean out that trauma first, and then you can come around with something like you have and pull that out.
Well, I do trauma healing. That's how I discovered them in the first place. So very much linked to trauma.
That's how they showed their face to you, wasn't it?
That was the first. Yeah, that was how. Working with deep trauma. Because I've been working for many years before I started working in this realm, if you like. So it was like I had my training too. But they're very unpleasant. And like you, I get attacked. And sometimes I come back and I cry, don't I? Other times I sleep. You were saying about the draining. It's exhausting.
Yeah, they're draining. They are.
Come back. I have to sleep, But I'm like, do you have a sort of criteria or a written document somewhere or something where,
like a toolbox,
almost like a toolbox, for people?
I do have that. They can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com,
right,
and then go to articles and read everything in articles. They can watch a number of videos. They can sign up for a therapy session with the MACE stuff.
Yeah, because this is it. I want to release people from this, and then I also want them to not be reinfected, if you like, which means kind of looking at it from a complete different perspective, but then also learning how much we control our vibration and our energy.
Self-care, basically.
Self-care,
Without the self-care, it's a whole...
Of our energy body. We give our physical body self-care. Why aren't we giving our energy body self-care?
People don't understand it enough.
Yeah, because the psychiatric and psychological mafia
just quash it,
changed it.
They don't go there.
They don't recognize it.
Yeah, they can't measure it. They can't see it. They can't feel it. So for them, it doesn't exist.
So Jerry, can I ask you, what do your former colleagues make of you and the work that you're doing? How are you perceived in your profession?
There's only one that I kind of keep touch with, but. If I were coming out with this information while I was working, there's no doubt I'd have been fired long ago.
Shut down.
And they don't want this information coming out because it interferes with their agenda. It just basically helps them. It doesn't help their clients.
No, it doesn't heal or cure anyone, does it?
It doesn't heal anything. It just makes them sicker.
And also the fallout in families and stuff, you know, it's really bad
Oh, yeah.
for the person that's unwell, but also the trauma it causes the person
Oh,
and
yeah.
their family.
And their family.
It's
And their family.
re-traumatizing.
So it spreads out. So it may affect,
Yeah.
1.5 million people, are schizophrenic in the United States.
How many?
But then you say, I think it's 1.5 million.
Okay.
I think that was the figure. But when you look at the trauma it causes to the rest of the family,
Yes.
you're talking a figure somewhere around 5 million people
Yeah.
are suffering because of a schizophrenic
Yeah.
who's taken over by these voices.
Yeah.
But also, if the lid's blown off this as well, don't forget that blows the lid off an awful lot else about our existence and what we really are.
And how it all really works.
And everything. So it doesn't just blow the lid off that, it actually blows the lid off a much bigger picture as well.
Yes.
Yes,
Which
yes,
is,
sure does.
yeah.
And they don't want that happening for
No.
sure.
They won't want us to be aware of our own energy or any other energy that exists in this realm.
No.
They don't want us to be able to work with it
Or suss it out.
or suss it out. So, you know,
Because the more we work out, the more we realise what.
well, and the more empowered we can become in our own energy.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
and then they would have nothing
So this
to
needs
feed
to be
from.
dampened down. It needs to be kept quiet because
Yes.
it blows the lid off. Not
Yes.
just psychiatric. That side of things, it blows the lid off the
All
whole.
of it.
Oh yeah, it does. I mean, their money and their power will start diminishing, and that's the
Massively.
last thing they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're not going to. If it wasn't for guys like you putting this information out, it wouldn't get out.
Yeah.
The system is not going to put out the truth.
Well, and
They're
look
just
at the
not gonna
trouble
put
we
out the
had
truth.
today, just to talk to you.
Yeah.
And
Phones recording phones, recording phones, recording phones.
but we have this all the time, and we're not a huge channel.
No.
It's because of what we talk about on here.
It's the nature of
I
us.
mean,
Yeah.
this interference is common. Virtually every interview I go on, there is some kind of interference.
So
Yeah.
you're used to it, Jerry. You're very kind
I'm
to
used
us
to it.
when we
So
were
it's
trying
like,
to
okay,
communicate you.
Here it comes again.
I know.
We had to write everything down and put it out to the camera.
Show
And
you.
we'll try another link.
Yeah, but we won't be defeated will we, Tash? We
No.
keep trying and we get there in the end.
We find a way.
So we're going to get cut off, I think, in about 2 minutes, Jerry. So
So Rebecca, how can I reach you if I have patients that I can't
help
I
or
can't
can't
help,
reach, maybe.
or
Shall I email you?
Yes.
On the work email, but I'll put in my personal email.
Okay.
And we'll talk that way, because I do think I was so excited to speak to you today, because I talk about what I do and I feel people don't believe me. I know you do.
I do.
And obviously
I-
the people I work with do. But
See, I'm running into more and more therapists like you who can see these things.
excellent.
And you all need to
I
come
can't-
together.
Yes.
You all need to come
Yeah,
together
yeah.
and perhaps write
Yeah.
papers and do reports and perhaps document it somehow. Perhaps,
Case
that's where we need to
studies,
go. Yeah.
case studies or something, because this is
Yeah.
real. This happens. I've helped people. You're helping people. People can be free of this terrible affliction, but
Yes,
it's not
yes.
a mental health disease.
No, it's not a disease.
It's a spiritual attack. It's spiritual
It is a
attack.
spiritual attack. It's not a physical.
No, manifestation. It may manifest itself in the physical body,
Yes.
but it's not a physical manifestation.
They're not
in its
physical. They're
habits.
not physical entities.
No.
Anyway, Jerry, I think we're going to get cut off imminently, and I hate the way we just get cut off with no warning. So I just wanted to say it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
It's been wonderful.
And we will continue contact, I feel, because we can maybe work together and, exchange ideas and experiences on our own research in
bet.
this. But
And I'll introduce you to other therapists who also can see these things.
I would love
That'd
that,
be good,
because
wouldn't
I
it?
don't know anyone else,
No,
do
she
I?
doesn't know anyone else.
Yeah. And when you get a link to this broadcast, let me know and I'll put it up on my website too.
Brilliant.
Definitely, we will, Jerry.